Just so you know, I'm live right now.
What?
I'm just letting you know I'm going live right now. So if you hear me talking, it's to the camera. Okay? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Just wanted to make it clear. Um. So, good morning. I am down lower than my lowest fasting weight a few weeks ago by doing 1 meal a day carnivore, and it's going very very well for me. 1 meal a day carnivore, basically sitting down and eating as much as I want in one sitting, has kept my blood sugar down, my ketone levels decent. I don't really have high ketone levels on carnivore, and I feel great. Honestly, I feel completely. I mean, I've never felt this good in my life. Just sitting down and eating steak and bacon and queso cheese and just the purest, softest forms of what I can get nutritionally. And it seems like my body's responding very, very well to it. But I noticed that every 24 hours that I fast and then I have my carnivore meal, right after it, I have diarrhea for the rest of the night. And it happens every single day. It's been happening that way for, um, I don't know, almost a week now. And it seems to be normal for me. Um, we'll see what happens. I'm going to run it out another week. But I don't even have any bowel movements at all throughout the day. And then once I eat my dinner, shortly after that, it's like right to the bathroom immediately. It's like clockwork. My body has learned to respond to this pattern. And I'm not so much worried about diarrhea just for the simple fact that um, it's expected when you're eating things that break down in a very acidic environment anyway. Um, so, some of my issues that I've been dealing with over the last, let's just say, 6 months to a year. One thing was, I've told you guys about a little pain, an acute pain that would float around inside my pectoral muscle. And it wasn't like skeletal deep, but it was underneath the layer of muscle. And it would be up at the top, over at the shoulder. It would be down, closer towards the nipple area, and then below it. And it kept happening. And I couldn't seem to figure out why this was happening. Was it a uric acid, or was it some type of acid buildup that was floating around? Um, I would talk to the doctor about it a few times. They couldn't pinpoint what it was. What I simply quit doing was I quit cycling between keto and carnivore so often. I would do maybe like a keto meal once every 2 or 3 weeks instead of once every week or twice a week, and the rest carnivore. And over the last 2 months of like kind of straightening that out, I ended up having that little pressure, that acute spot that was floating around inside my chest. It quit. It just quit. Nothing was working. The medicine wasn't working. The massages weren't working. The doctor didn't understand really what was going on. But just by limiting myself to the same type of food every single day and minimally switching back and forth, um, that took that pressure away, whatever that little pressure pain spot that was floating around inside my chest. And I've been, 99% carnivore. You guys have seen some of the meals that I've been cooking where it's veal heart and, steak and bacon, different types of cheeses that I'm trying, but more fresh type cheeses and not so much aged cheeses. I'm responding to fresh cheeses a lot better than I am aged cheeses. The aged cheeses, I start getting little red dots on my face, like little pimples, almost like little inflammation marks. Um, I've noticed that I do have somewhat of a histamine reaction to those types of aged cheeses. I had to quit doing a lot of the soured cabbage, like sauerkraut, when I do have other things outside of carnivore. I'll just have regular fried cabbage because that fermented sour substance does have histamine count to it, and that was causing some of my reactions to pop up. It was causing some irritation during sleeping. I was tossing and turning all night. So when I went to more fresh foods, more meats, soft, fresh cheeses, not so much fermented, aged stuff, I've noticed that a lot of my conditions have completely went away, and I'm back to losing weight again. And I didn't understand that maybe when I was doing keto type stuff, what would cause me to stop from losing weight. And I'm starting to understand more and more that I actually have more of an allergic histamine type reaction to foods than what I thought. I haven't been eating avocado as much, even though I love avocado. It was causing some issues for me. The same with like pickles and vinegars and things like that. All the basic symptoms that I was reading on histamine type reactions is exactly what I was dealing with. And I didn't realize that that was causing some discomfort for me in my life. And by eliminating that stuff and going to more fresh foods that aren't aged, that don't have sourness to them and things of that nature, I've noticed that I react to foods a lot better and I actually feel better. So if that's one of the things that you guys are fighting, trying to figure out, well, I'm eating clean keto, how come this stuff isn't working for me? Well, even clean keto has its downfalls. The ketogenic diet in general, because of how many sour things and how many aged things people add into their diet, has a huge downfall. And the biggest downfall to that is the amount of aged time the food has. And then you get, people that come along and they want to try the what is the rotten meat, the high meat or something like that, where they're rotting this meat on purpose, and then weeks and weeks later or months later they're going back and they're eating it. All that stuff is going to have a super high histamine count to it. Any kind of highly processed meats and things like that, that's going to have a very high histamine count to it. So I started limiting the amount of times I go get in processed sausage, and I don't get it out of a pack anymore. I get it from the deli where they process it themselves. I don't seem to have the same reaction to it. Um, so in general, it's like cuts of meat, slabs of meat, fresh cheeses, things like that. If I want to have milk, I don't have like I try to get raw milk from Allgrass Farms, but if I can't get raw milk from Allgrass Farms because they're only right down the road from me at work, like 10 minutes away, um, I'm okay with all that. Yeah, it's called high meat is what it's called, and they basically rot and ferment the meat, and then they turn around and they eat it, and they make it out of like liver and things like that, and it's disgusting. I mean, I don't know how people do it. I mean, I guess I can't talk trash about it because I'm not one to consume it, but there are people that like that kind of thing and they're eating it, and their theory is that it will build up their gut bacteria and stuff like that, and it will add to the flora that they should have that they don't have. And I think that that is just all something that's built up in their head. I think a lot of the craziness in the carnivore community and stuff in general, with everybody wanting to eat raw pork and raw bacon and raw this and raw that, and people even eating raw chicken and stuff, it's uncalled for. I mean, if you're going to do that stuff, you do that in your own time. But a lot of people are starting to promote that more mainstream now, and it's very disastrous. I think it's very bad for people to promote stuff like that, especially the fact that people are behind the scenes getting sick, like low key. I've had lots of conversations with people off camera that do this type of stuff and promote a more carnivore type lifestyle, and they openly admit to me they are getting sick while they're doing these kinds of things at times, but they won't admit it on camera. They won't tell people on camera that, yeah, I did have raw pork, I did have raw bacon, I did have raw beef, I did have this fermented high meat, and I did get sick and I ended up in the hospital. But on camera, they won't do that. And I'm not here to dime them out and make them look bad, but there's a lot of things that people are doing to their own health and they're sabotaging their own health, but they won't talk to you guys about it. People won't come forward and say one of the major downfalls to a ketogenic diet is the fact that it's a very allergy promoting, it's a very histamine promoting type diet. It's not the end all be all diet to all diets. It's a very good diet, but it still has a lot of histamine count to it. Histamine mimics allergies. So if you notice around allergy season and stuff like that, if you typically have your allergies kind of under control, but now that you've started a ketogenic diet or you're eating more like avocados and vinegars and fermented foods and aged foods, and during that time of year things are substantially worse, you need to start cutting that stuff out. Allergies are the same mimicking principle as histamine. Your body produces histamine very naturally on its own. It sends signals to the brain, it helps create stomach acid. There's a number of things that it does. And it's very natural for the body to do that. But when we start consuming foods that are aged and soured and fermented, it actually starts exasperating those conditions. It makes them worse, and it actually makes your body pump out more stomach acid than it needs to. It makes your allergies worse during allergy season. There's a number of things that happens, and you being your own detective and trying to diagnose these things can be possible without going to see a doctor, but you have to be very educated on the manner. And there's not a lot of people that actually understand histamine count like they think they do, or they or they want to. There's not a lot of doctors that still understand it. It's still within the last few years, more and more people are trying to understand it, but they do understand most of the reaction comes from aged, soured, fermented foods and unfortunate and processed, highly processed foods, or meat and stuff that has been sitting in a container for a long period of time, like olive oils with like anchovies and stuff like that, or sardines, those types of things that sit there, and it's basically flesh in a can, and it just sits there and waits for somebody to come along and eat it. That has a very high histamine count to it. So fresh meats, fresh cheeses, the fresher the food that you can get, the better off you are. So that's one of the main things. You know what made me start thinking about a lot of this is I was trying to look at a lady brought a 2008 um, Ford Fusion in, and I was having a heck of a time trying to figure out what's going on with this connector here. This was my problem, and I'm trying to diagnose something just like when I look at cars and I diagnose cars, I diagnose myself the same way, my health. That's how a doctor diagnoses you. They diagnose you the same exact way. There is no difference. They try to figure out what inputs are getting put into the brain, what outputs are happening, what signals are being sent, what packets of information are being missed. That's the same exact thing that I do with the vehicle. That's why I understand this. That and some people think, oh, you're just full of yourself. You no, the reason I understand this is because I'm an advanced programmer in what I do. I have to program these computers. I have to make them talk. I have to figure out what's wrong when they're not communicating to different parts of the vehicle the same way. Just like a doctor looks at you and says, well, this hormone sends this signal, and this does this, and this organ creates this hormone. So let's try to figure out why the brain is not seeing enough of this signal. Is there something wrong with this organ? So we need to test this organ. Well, you come to me, you bring your vehicle to me. I'm saying, well, the computer needs to see that you're hitting the on button for the cruise control, but it can't see the on button for the cruise control. So let me go to this module and figure out why this module is not sending this signal to the computer so the computer can see turn the cruise control on. Well, it's the same way that I diagnose things. I diagnose things the same exact way. And when somebody like me, or like Dave Feldman with his cholesterol stuff, he's got a very, very engineering type mind, a very mechanically motivated mind. When we see things operate a certain way, inputs, outputs, and reactions to things, they exactly work the same way in the body. When the body sees things and inputs things and outputs things, it has to have a reaction to those things. And it's the same exact mindset. It's like an automotive doctor versus a medical doctor. I can make a mistake on a car and be completely fine and fix that mistake. Sometimes you can't with a human body. So that's why I tend to think about things in the same form I do automotive stuff, but I don't get into it until I've thought about it for a while. And the other day, I was thinking about this car. I was like, why is this thing? Why can I not get this airbag light to go off? Why is the side airbag impact airbag in the side of the seat? It's not the one in the dash, not the one in the door. It's the one in the side of the seat. Why won't this light go off? I cannot figure out why the computer's not seeing the right signal. And then I started thinking about my body. And I started thinking about the way my mind interprets things in the way it has to send certain signals and packets and stuff like that. And where's the resistance in the circuit? Where's the breakdown happening? So I started thinking about what I do with myself. And I said, well, wait a second. Let me pull out the manual. Let me pull out the diagram. So I pull out the book and I open up the page. It was like 34-F. And I see the entire circuit of that airbag. Where the computer's at, what circuits go out to that airbag, and what's going on here. So I can see it's a two-wire system. It goes from the restraint control module. The two wires go down the center of the car. They come out, they go underneath the seat. They go into a big connector that feeds into two other systems as well as goes up to that airbag. Well, I start dissecting the circuits. And I'm looking at the circuits and I can see, wait a second, what are these? These are connectors. But are these just connectors? These are not just connectors. These are receptor sites as well. This is not just a connector that plugs into another connector. This connector has a receptor site in it. Basically, whenever there's inflammation in the body, there's a breakdown, there's a bad signal, something like that, it starts to shut things down. It says, whoa, 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 wait a second here. This can be disastrous. We cannot go forward with this here. You have to shut down the signal right now. This cannot work. We need to stop. Well, the same thing with a dog. A dog has a pinched nerve, something like that. It detects there's something wrong here. It shuts that dog down immediately. It says, down you go. You don't move right now because you're going to hurt yourself. It's a feeling that that dog feels, and the body knows it needs to shut down and stop until something's fixed. The same way with this airbag signal. There's a shorting bar inside this connector. You're not going to be able to see inside it, but at the bottom of these two tabs down here, there's a shorting bar that goes across it. You might be able to see this little metal piece back in there. When this system detects there's a fault, it shuts the system down and it says, nope, do not go. We cannot send a signal to that airbag, because if you make that airbag deploy, you could kill somebody or hurt somebody if it deploys falsely. It's getting a bad signal from this. So that shorting bar sends the current back through the other side and right back to the computer and does not let it go to the airbag, and it says something's wrong here. The inputs and outputs of the system are not working correctly. The shorting bar says, nope, I cannot let power pass to that airbag. I'm sending it right back to the computer until this is fixed. So I'm in there looking at the computer. What is the resistance that the computer needs to see from the airbag? It needs to see between 1.2 ohms of resistance and 4.3, and it has to stay within that threshold. If it stays within that threshold, everything's kosher. The airbag's functioning fine. As soon as it drops below or it's too high, things can happen. Power can end up where it's not supposed to be. It can do some things where it sets off other airbags in the system, so it shuts down that circuit, and the little shorting bar inside here, somehow, the way the engineers built this thing, detects there's a problem, and it sends it right back to the computer, and it does not get to the airbag. So I'm looking at this thing, and I said, I see, when I'm looking at where the computer's at, the brain, when I'm looking at my brain and where the computer's at in the vehicle, I said, okay, here's the computer. There's one connector, there's two connectors, there's three connectors. The connector up the airbag. Let me see what happens when I unplug that connector. Well, I grab that connector and I unplug it. I'm looking at my resistance reading in the computer. Nothing changes. So I thought, well, that's odd. It should change. I go down to the next connector. I'm ruling out the path of least resistance is the way anything's going to flow. Even when you look at, we'll get into the law of thermodynamics and stuff like that at a later time, but I've been doing a lot of reading into the law of thermodynamics and how doctors and stuff should be looking at things of that nature too, but they don't. So electricity and power flow is always going to take the path of least resistance. If it doesn't have nowhere else to go, it's going to go in the path that it's intended to. Well, the shorting bar that's inside this connector allows it to do that. And I'm thinking to myself, certain things start to shut down inside the body whenever there's a problem. So I go from the airbag and connect it. I don't see a resistance change in the computer. I go down to the next connector, which is this connector right here. This end goes up to the airbag. The other end goes to the computer. I unplug it. All of a sudden, I see 25,000 ohms, as if it says it's an open circuit, because anything over 10,000 ohms means ideally that it's an open. All of a sudden, it goes from 0.3 ohms to 25,000 ohms. I was like, wait a second, plug it back in, 0.3, unplug it, 25. Well, wait, something's wrong between this connector and the connector up in the airbag. Something's wrong inside this circuit here. It has nothing to do with the wires that go to the computer or the computer itself. It's the transfer of information from the second connector in the harness up to the airbag. So I unplug the airbag again. Nothing changes in the computer. I unplug this one again, 25,000 ohms. So I've eliminated my problem here. I know this part of the circuit is not the issue no more. I can leave it out of the equation. What is going on between here and this other 2-foot section of wire? Something inside this is not correct. So I grab my individual handheld meter out. I go to one pin, I go to the pin up top. 0.3 ohms, exactly what the computer's seeing. So what's going on here? Why is this reading the same exact thing unconnected? So then I go to the other side. I stay on the same pin here, and I jump over to the other wire. 0.3 ohms. Why is it reading on both wires? I'm still on the same pin. There are two individual wires. They should not be reading. I go back to the schematic. Wait a second. There's a shorting block inside here. That shorting block is the failsafe for the system. No wonder why I can put one test lead on one wire and then go test each individual one on the other side, and I'm getting the same reading. This shorting block inside this connector that is the failsafe actually failed. It had nothing to do with the component failing. It was the actual failsafe that was built into the connector that failed. So I go unpin the connector. I pull the pins out of it, get this out of the equation completely. Go take the wires and plug them back into the circuit individually outside of the connector, and just carefully lay them because I don't want to short anything out and pop the airbag while I'm working on it. And I lay the wires back down exactly where they are, and I put a little piece of plastic in between so they can't touch, and I go back up, plug in the airbag, look at the computer, 2.10 ohms, exactly what the computer was supposed to be reading. The connector was bad. It was because a faulty failsafe that was put inside the system that actually failed. By depinning this connector and putting the wires back in the circuit individually, I was able to pinpoint the problem by using the same thing that I try to do with my health. Well, if that's not it, let me go to this. Well, if that's not it, let me go to this. Well, avocado is starting to cause some reactions for me. High meat is starting to cause some reactions for me, whatever it may be. It's a process of elimination sometimes. By using what I do in my health and what I understand online, and the more and more I study, it's starting to bleed over into what I do professionally in my real job. What I do there anyway, you would think that's what I should be doing, but sometimes we, as mechanics, technicians, your mind, it hurts from the amount of information you have to compute. It's not like it was 50 years ago where you could, open the hood of a vehicle and tear apart the engine in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, the whole top of the engine was apart, and you were good to go. Now there's sensors and actuators and wires and modules all over the place that we have to understand so much more about what's going on with that vehicle that didn't have to be understood before. So the level of computation, the level of signals that get sent back and forth, the level of resistances that have to get checked, the different types of wires that are having to be used, the different types of ways that these connectors have to be taken apart. In order to get this connector apart, there's a center. You see the red piece in the center here that's broken? I broke that. Because this connector's so old, I went to go pick the center of it and pull it up to unlock it so I could get down to the locking tabs inside and then pull each wire out of the back individually. So there's a locking tab inside here. And I take a little pick and I pull down on that locking tab, and then I slide the wire out of the back of it. And I jump over to the other side, inside, and I pull down the locking tab and I pop it out. But that centerpiece right there is what locks everything in. And if you put any kind of pressure on it, when they get old, they break. Well, this is obsolete. Ford doesn't offer this part anymore. This is not a part that's sold because it's such a sensitive item. It's part of the airbag. It needs to be installed by a professional, me, and it needs to be wired back into the circuit. Luckily, I was able to go through the computer and look at all these different wiring diagrams and find this connector face and order this component individually by a completely different part number that the average Joe Smo or average technician would have not known what to do. They would have never been able to find this because this is an obsolete component. And that's why it's important for you to go to a doctor that specializes in what you're interested in. So if you're on a ketogenic diet, a low carb diet, something like that, you go to your standard medical doctor, they're not going to be able to pinpoint those types of things. They're not going to be able to answer those types of questions. They're going to give you some generic answer. Oh, order the whole seat and you'll get the harness with the whole seat, then you'll be able to replace it. Oh, so it cost me $600 for a seat instead of $22 for a pigtail connector with the wires and everything already wired in. There's a difference. There's a difference in diagnosing things in your life, your health, your vehicles, the professionals you go to. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why people practice and get paid for what they do. Oftentimes in the automotive industry, you'll have independent guys that they'll say, oh, I can do that. I'm just as good as you. Yeah, you can do that. And you might think that you're just as good as me, but you're probably not. This is what I specialize in. I don't have to work on 15 different makes and models every single day. I work on Ford products every single day. And every once in a while, those other models and makes will come in, but I specialize in this. This is my profession. This is what I went to school to profess in, and that's what I do. So you may think that you can do something as good as me, but you cannot. And that is a fact. And you go through this in life, the same thing with your keto doctors and your regular doctors. A keto doctor is going to be 10 times more apt to figure out what's wrong with you and be able to help you. Somebody that studies this and goes through this stuff, rather than your average doctor from down the street that doesn't even understand what's going on and is still telling you that it's bad for your health. You're going to die if you do it. It's a matter of interpretation of what you want to do and diagnosing things in a respectful process of elimination type way. Unfortunately, that's what we've come to. Is there's nobody that's going to be able to pinpoint this is what's wrong with you. How many times have you seen people do like the 23andMe testing and the 23andMe testing because they've individually taken the step to send in their DNA to do that type of stuff and get it back and see, oh wow, something's wrong with my B methyl whatever, something's wrong with this, something. The doctor would have never seen this if I didn't ask to do this individual testing myself, and now I can try to figure out what's wrong with me. Now I can see that even though that 23andMe, is under a bunch of scrutiny and stuff like that, with people selling information and all this other stuff and yada yada yada, that provided information for people that they would have not seen elsewhere unless you specifically asked or paid for it through your medical provider. So there's steps that I take in my life to try to figure out what's wrong with me. Maybe this is what's causing the problem. Let me cut it out for a while. Maybe me doing this type of habit and stuff every single day is what's causing the problem. Let me cut it out for a while. Maybe I'm staying up too late and abusing the privileges of being on social media, and that's why my sleep's off. Let me cut it out for a while. There's a number of things that people can look at and diagnose in lives individually just by a process of elimination. They don't do it. How many of you have a profession in your life that can bleed over into your personal life? Or you're really good at something in your personal life that can bleed over into your professional life and you don't even use it. It's a skill that you tend to not even use. Look at me, what I do here every single day on the keto groups, individually coaching people, using the new mentor program on Facebook where I'm mentoring people and I'm talking to them. I'm individually being a part of their life. The new mentor program on Facebook ends up, it's like a 5 or 6 step process in your private group. And I didn't even know it was an option. I wonder how many group creators of these keto groups and stuff don't know that it's an option. And I saw it over on the side when I was on the computer. It doesn't show on the phone. But on the computer it said, start a mentorship in your private group. I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. You could actually mentor people individually through a tracked messaging, just like Messenger, and it gives you notifications that hey, your week 1 is done. Maybe you can recap on your progress with the person. You've set some goals and stuff like that going into week 2, and it kind of gives you a few brief notes on what to do. Maybe you could check in on this person, ask them about their food, ask them how they feel, ask them about progress and stuff like that. So then it'll say, do you want to end the mentorship now or do you want to continue? Why continue? Because it's free. I want to help people. I don't want to push people away. I would never end it until they asked for it to end. And I hit continue. Go into week 2. This is kind of a guide on where the health mentor program would point you. Let's start looking at taking some action on these things. Let's start maybe implementing some new things and keeping communication in these areas. And then you follow it and it works. And you get into week 3 and it says, over the last 3 weeks, let's do a 3-week progress on what has been changing. What do you think needs to change? Maybe just communicate real lightly about things organically and see where it went. And it's a mentored step progress. And anybody can go in here. You go in there, you sign up your name and stuff like that. You say either I want to be a mentor or I want to be mentored. And you fall in these categories. And people can click on you, select you. They can say, hey, I would like to chat with this person. Is this, click on them. Would you like to be my mentor? And if they have time, then they'll say yes or they'll say no, and they'll help you through. It's a very, 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 very good thing on Facebook that a lot of people don't even know about. And I have a few people that message me based off of that. And if you forget to talk to each other, sometimes it'll pop up and give you a reminder, hey, at the end of week 2, you want to message this person real quick just to kind of see what's going on, figure out where you're at. It'd be nice to catch up. It's a very, very, very good thing. So if you don't know about that and you're in a group that you think maybe, or you have your own group, you think maybe that could be a benefit to some people, I think it's a great tool. I think it's something that would help people diagnose their health. It would help just communicate and just kind of network back and forth. Um, Hi, Linda. It's a great tool for people, and if people learn to, it's free. You don't get charged for it. You can't charge people for it. It's part of Facebook. It's part of the app. Um, so basically, I wanted to share with you guys how I've used my health and keto and what I've been learning and stuff, um, how it bleeds over into my professional life. When I look at, kind of like a lazy thyroid, and how, the conversion of T3 to T4 doesn't happen like it's supposed to, and how it could be from, low, low, um, what is it? What is the sea kelp? What does it have? Iron deficiency? Not iron deficiency. What the heck is it? What's the name? What am I looking for? What's in sea kelp that helps that T3 makeup? Is it iron? Brain fart for a second here. Anyway, when you go through these types of things and you're looking at a lazy thyroid, iodine, sorry, um, iodine, and you're trying to diagnose, is it an iodine problem? Is it a T3 receptor problem or a T4 receptor problem? And or is adding more carbs and helping function your thyroid function? Because some people say that a little bit more carbohydrates do help them. Some people say that it doesn't help them, it slows them down. And when I look at that and I'm looking at a lazy oxygen sensor on a screen and I'm trying to diagnose it, I can kind of look at the things the same way. If I increase the amount of oxygen going into the engine, is my oxygen sensor slowing down? Is it changing? Is it erratic? Is it popping all over the place on the screen, letting me know that there's an issue? Or is it functioning like it's supposed to? Rich, lean, rich, lean, rich, lean. And is it switching like it's supposed to? I can introduce those problems into the equation to see how it's fixing it. Or I can just add a bunch of oxygen. I can get a torch and just turn on the oxygen tank by itself and just find a port right in the induction system and just dump that oxygen straight into the induction system and watch my upstream and downstream O2 sensors to see, are they lazy or are they rich? Or, I mean, are they lazy? Are they functioning? Are they not functioning at all? Is the heating element going out in them? And I can watch and see them function based on inputs and outputs. And your body, you can kind of interpret and change things the same exact way. Is adding more iodine to the system helping you? Is adding more carbs to the system helping you? Is, elongated versions of fasting helping you? What types of things and how are your numbers changing accordingly in a diagnostic mode, diagnostic mindset, more mechanical mindset, um, than anything. That's why whenever people talk about this data, this survey type data and things like that, I'm not interested in that. I don't care about the medical studies. I want to see the mechanistic studies. I want to see how the mechanism works. I want to see how it functions. I want to see how it reacts, because that doesn't lie. That is something that doesn't lie. If you're looking at the mechanism itself and you're changing the inputs and outputs of the mechanism and you can see how it functions and how it reacts to things, things of that nature, that is going to tell me the truth 100% of the time. But that's where I get faulted a lot on social media, because people are like, well, you have to look at the meta-analyses and the peer-reviewed studies and all this. No, I don't. I'm not interested in that. I absolutely am not interested in it. I want to see how it is functioning. That's it. I want to see the mechanistic data of it. I want to see the real live results of it. I want to see where it's supposed to be. How are we going to get it there? I don't care about what 1,000 people study says. That might give me a little bit of information, but I want to see each person how they react to things individually. And Tom says today's world is a replace, don't repair mentality. I used to fight against it in my property management business. However, now people don't really appreciate what it takes to repair things. They're So that's where they wanted to go with this at first. Whenever I was trying to diagnose this airbag connector, they wanted to just put a whole seat in it at first. And I said, well, if you give me time to look at it, it'll probably save you a lot of money, and you can keep the component in the vehicle instead of putting a seat in here that doesn't even match. And I went to looking at it more and more and more, and then I started thinking about the whole way I would diagnose myself as opposed to diagnosing the circuit, and they should have been conducted the same exact way. And I was letting it on my professional side break down. It seemed like I was almost looking at things in a more professional standpoint on health than I actually was through, a component on a vehicle. When if I would have looked at it exactly the same way that I did as I do my health, I found it right away. I started to break down how I was looking at it and doing it more of a diagnostic health type mindset and being more mindful and careful of what's going on inside the circuit. And that's how I found out the shorting bar inside the connector was actually what was causing the problem. The ironic thing is that shorting bar inside the connector was supposed to be the very thing that saves the circuit, not causes the problem. So I think if we started looking at things from more of a diagnostic standpoint and a more mechanistic standpoint, how does it work? How does it function? What does it need to see? What does it output? Where's the breakdown? Where are the connectors in between? The same thing with your health. What happens when I eat too much sugar? My insulin reacts. What happens when I have too much insulin chronically over time? I become resistant to it. How do I fix that problem? I need to go more into a low sugar, low carb, ketogenic style, fasted type state, carnivorous type state, so my body can start reacting to that insulin stuff, create more sensitivity instead of resistance to it. Well, the same thing with this type of stuff. If I replace something in the system or I fix something in the system, I have to end up relearning that type of process. The computer has to build a new block of information and data in order to see how that component is supposed to function properly. So there's a number of things that go on inside the body that happen just like it does in the thank you, Tom, I appreciate that. There's a number of things that go on inside the body that happen in the electrical world, the mechanical world, the trade world. You would be so surprised at how close the way things work inside your body that work they work the same exact way in our professions in real life. They work exactly the same. They may have different names, and they may some components may be more sensitive than others, but they work the same way. That's how I was able to figure out what this is. That's how I was able to figure out what was wrong with my gut over the last year. That's how I was able to figure out what was wrong with that floating pain around in my chest over the last year. Is I started looking at things from more of a mechanical, what am I doing different? What inputs and outputs are going on? The doctor can't fix it. Well, obviously I'm going to have to fix it. Today I was looking at a YouTuber. He does a lot of reviews on cars, and I felt bad at first because this video has been about it's been out for about a year, and the title of the video is "Don't Put a Cold Air Intake on Your Crown Victoria P71 Motor." And I started watching the video, and I started looking at his mindset on how he looks at the components that are on the vehicle. And he was saying, don't do this. Don't put a cold air intake on your P71 Crown Vic motor because you're going to cause this check engine light to come on. Red flag, same kind of thing. And I'm automatically going to health type stuff as I'm thinking about what he's saying because my profession is automotive, but I like to take some of the health type stuff and mix in with it because it actually enhances my ability to diagnose things. And I'm listening to what he says in the video, and he says this drive-by-wire system, and he's grabbing the throttle body of an old P71 engine that has a cable that goes to it and a return spring. That's just a cable-operated throttle body. That's not called a drive-by-wire system. A drive-by-wire system is where you actually press on the gas, and it sends a signal through, and that actually tells the electronic throttle body to move. That is a drive-by-wire system. What he was explaining was a cable spring return type system. But he was calling it a drive-by-wire system because a wire was connected from the pedal to it. And we do the same thing in the health field. We call things stuff that it's not, and we confuse people. We call things and diagnose things in the wrong way in the health field, and we confuse people. The same way this guy was confusing people that was watching his video. And I politely had to reply with, that is not a cable, or that is not a drive-by-wire system. That is a cable spring return type system that's connected to the pedal mechanically. A drive-by-wire system is a motor that turns the butterfly in the throttle body with a connector that's connected to it. The driver pushes on the gas, it sends a signal to the computer makes the butterfly on the throttle body move, and it sends a return signal back. So it's got a voltage, a ground, a VREF signal, and a signal return. Those all have to have inputs and outputs to work correctly. That is a drive-by-wire system. You are not explaining that correctly, and it's confusing people. So then I'm listening to more about what he's talking about. And he says the mass airflow that sits up in the front of the induction tube before it gets to the throttle body, there's some miscommunication between the mass airflow and the drive-by-wire electronic throttle body, and that's what's causing the wrench light to pop up on the P71 interceptor motor on the Crown Vics and stuff like that. And it's absolutely not. The mass airflow does not communicate with the drive-by-wire system. The mass airflow's job has a heating element that's inside it. And as air passes across that element, not only does it cool off that wire based on air temperature, it also can detect a blocked learned system of air density, how much oxygen is passing through that as well. So there are two reporters for oxygen. There's a mass airflow that actually cools down and heats up. That's how it can detect, based on resistance, what temperature is in the air. And it also detects how much oxygen density is coming through there as well, based on how much that heats up and cools down by a block learned data that's built into the system, and a reporting tattletale, the oxygen sensor in the exhaust. So as long as those two are jiving with each other, the computers are getting good signals, and everything's in a block type data that's built into the vehicle, everything functions fine. There's nowhere in that system does that mass airflow actually connect to the throttle body and see how it moves and it changes data input. It doesn't happen that way. You would not want you wouldn't want your airbag connector to be in the same circuit as your radio connector, right? You would blow all your airbags up. You would not want your mass airflow connector to communicate with your throttle body because they don't really have anything to do with each other. All the mass airflow does is detect air temperature and density. That's it. All the throttle body does is open and close based on throttle response and helps control some of the idle. That's it. The two of them do not communicate with each other. The mass airflow sends a signal to the computer, and the computer is able to interpret the air density along with the oxygen sensor downstream. The input from the driver's foot to the computer to the throttle body either opens or closes based on more airflow or less airflow, increasing your fuel injection to increase fuel as more air is coming in. And as that happens, your map sensor deflects with a piezo resistive crystal on the top, detecting load. So this helps change and shorten shift points. It either hardens or softens shift points, as well as detects a load on the engine. There's nowhere in that circuit does that mass airflow actually communicate with that throttle body. And this guy's got, I don't know, 80,000 plus subscribers on his channel. And people flock to this guy for information. And I'm thinking to myself, how many doctors are out there just like this guy that don't actually understand exactly what they're doing and are giving this type of information to other people? And people in the thousands are coming to them and getting information from them, and they do not know what they're talking about. There's nowhere in that system that mass airflow communicates with that throttle body. They are not built to communicate with each other. They were each two individual inputs to the computer that computes what happens. They do not talk to each other. And his whole thing was, don't put a cold air intake on your police interceptor motor. Your P71 motor is what it's called, because it'll set a wrench light, especially the K&N. This just goes to show me ignorance, because BBK makes a cold air, Banks makes a cold air, I think Borg Warner makes a cold air, K&N makes a cold air. All these companies make cold air intakes that can set off the check engine light, but you pinpointed K&N. Just like people pinpoint a keto diet for the most destructive diet, which is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's any throttle bot or any type of cold air system on that vehicle would throw that check engine light if that was the case and cause an issue. Not what this guy was saying. This goes to show me firsthand this guy does not know what he's talking about. And then when I look at the subscriber count of who's there, I'm like, man, how does this dude have 80,000 subscribers? But somebody like me that understands the ins and outs of these systems, like it's nobody's business, like I am the system. People just, huh? Well, like they don't even know. It boggles my mind sometimes. Furthermore, putting a cold air on any vehicle will not set a check engine light. It's the person that sets the check engine light. And why is that? Whenever you modify a vehicle from the factory to make it perform better than what it is, you're taking it out of its characteristic of what it's built for. You're taking it out of the characteristic of it being a stock type vehicle. So if you're going to increase the airflow, if you're going to increase the diameter of things and you're going to put more pressure in things and stuff like that, guess what you have to do? You have to retune, reprogram your brain, the computer, to be able to do that. Do you think Brian Shaw, four-time world's strongest man, he might be five now. I think he's four right now. I think he's shooting for five. Maybe he's five. Do you think Brian Shaw just all of a sudden overnight made it to 430 pounds and became the strongest man in the world? He had to reprogram his body to do that. It was a slow, progressive step of doing that. He had to reprogram himself and get bigger and learn more and get bigger and learn more and get bigger and learn more. And his hormones changed as he was doing it. His body was reprogramming itself as it went there. You have to do the same thing with a vehicle. If you want a bigger engine, you want to make more power, you want to modify that thing, you got to call up SCT, you got to go to a local tuner. There's a number of things that you can do to actually compute and put those things into the computer so the computer can see those things and operate correctly. So it's not a matter of don't put this cold air intake on your P71 Interceptor motor. It's a matter of knowing if I do this, I may have to reprogram this computer. And then at the end of it, he says, I've taken this vehicle to the dealer 5 or 6 times or something like that, and they can't figure out how to get this check engine light to go away because of the cold air intake I've put on that. Are you kidding me? It's a tube and a sensor, and it's just bigger. There's nothing special about that. If you would have brought that vehicle to me, I would have wiped out the data that was in it. I would have put the factory stuff back on it. I would have put the as-built data in, or I would have PMI'd the system. The PMI is where you basically install it as a new component. I would have made it think the computer's new and reprogrammed it, or I would have went back to the original data that it was built with, wiped it out, and reprogrammed it and put that data back in there so the car sees that everything's completely fine. Don't tell me that you've taken this to the dealer 5 times and they haven't been able to figure this out. It's a standard programming practice, especially when we know people have done aftermarket upgrades to vehicles. So there's a whole lot of stuff to think about in this video here. There's a whole lot of stuff to think about. And although I didn't stay on health topic completely, I made that known in my title that I would not stay on the health topic completely. I wanted to talk about diagnostics, thinking about things in general in a mechanical standpoint, and engaging your health and what's going on with you from a mechanical standpoint, seeing raw numbers, seeing raw results, seeing live action, figuring it out from a step-by-step process, and engaging your health from the best way that you possibly can. And if you do it this way, you can't go wrong doing it. There's no other way that you can pinpoint things exactly other than doing it like this and knowing that you figured it out. Anyway, that's pretty much all I got right now. I hope some of you have gained something from this. I know I got some car guys and some mechanical people and some electrical and appliance people on here that'll appreciate that little bit of jargon going back and forth. But that's it, guys. It's Saturday. I've been carnivore for the last week. Actually, last night I did have just a little bit of some green and purple cabbage chopped up with some pork sausage, but it was just a little small bowl. It wasn't very much, just enough to give my gut a little something other than just animal food, and then right back into carnivore. That's pretty much it. I don't have anything else, so I'm going to leave you guys to your Saturday, and I hope you've gotten something out of this video. And if you have, let me know. Maybe you learned something. Maybe you have some comments for me or whatever. Maybe you can leave them in the comment section. Thumb up of the video. As always, please hit that thumbs up. It helps the video spread. And if you don't mind, share it to somebody. If maybe you think of some car guys that would get a kick out of this, or somebody that it would help them look at things from an individual standpoint. or maybe you just don't find any relevance in this video at all, and you can leave that too. You can tell me about that. I appreciate it. Thank you. Enjoy, guys. Be blessed and have a great day. Remember, this is your journey, not anybody else's. You got to live it, not anybody else. I'm going to tune out for now. Thank you.